Boker or Masechet Bava Kamma Daf Yud 13a1. Says the Gemara, we were talking about Rabbi Elmaleh and Rabbanan, which means, right, we were talking about that if it's proper that according to Rabbi Elmaleh, Kadashim Kalim, right, remember there was different things, Kadashim Kalim. Kadashim Kalim is a Shlamim, Bechor, Maaser, right, all these things, all these types of Korbanot, the Shlamim, they're all Kadashim, right, the Pesach, right, they're all Kadashim Kalim. So according to Shittat Rabbi Elmaleh, Kadashim Kalim Mechayim, when they're still alive, they're considered Mamon Ba'alim. So why don't we just answer Pravina that the Braita is talking about the Kadashim Kalim is Mamon Ba'alim, it's Shittat Rabbi Elmaleh, and the other one is Shittat Rabbanan. So the Gemara answers Matanot Kiuna Kamarta. You're talking about Matanot Kiuna. Shane Matanot Kiuna. So if you remember, this is where we finished by the 2 dots yesterday, that when you're talking about Matanot Kiuna, there are 24 Matanot Kiuna. The 24 Matanot Kiuna, they are Zocheh from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So since they are Zocheh from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's a completely different halacha. Okay, and that's what we actually mentioned in the halachot. Okay, fine. Gufa, this is where we're starting. Okay, right? He comes and he says like this, right? Gufa. So he comes and he says like this. When we're talking about right now, Umala mal b'Hashem. Remember, we're talking about Mi'ilah. Mi'ilah, remember, is benefiting from Kodshim. You're not allowed to benefit from Kodshim. So it says over here, Ma'ala mal b'Hashem, v'chichesh ba'mito. He says, L'rabot kadashim kalim. This comes to be merbe kadashim kalim. Okay, so he comes and he says now like this. He says, Shehem mamono, right? He comes and he says, which is going to be the money. Divrei Rabbi Yosef Galileh. These are the words of Rabbi Yosef HaGalileh. Ben Azai comes and he says, L'rabot the shlamim. This comes to be merbe the shlamim. Abba ben Dosai comes and he says, Lo amar ben Azai ela bivchor bilvad. We're only talking about by a bechor. Okay, what does that mean? So he comes and he says, that means according to ben Azai, we're adding in a shlamim. And according to Abba Yosef ben Dosai, we're talking about a bechor. So Amar More comes and he says like this. He says, Ben Azai comes and he says, L'rabot et shlamim. When we're talking about right now to include a shlamim, the miyutemai, what are we coming to exclude them? Remember, shlamim is kadashim kalim. But what are we coming to exclude? If you're going to tell me it's coming to exclude a bechor, and a bechor is also kadashim kalim. So he says, Hashta now, umash shlamim shetunim smicha umsachim utrufat chaze v'shok. Amarta mamon balim hu. If right now in a case where you have a shlamim, which you need to do semicha, you need to do nisachim, you need to do semicha is leaning on the animal. You need to do nisachim, the wine libations. You need to do right the trufat chaze v'shok, which means you're going to wave right the breast area, the chest area, and the shok and the thigh area. Amarta, you said mamon balim hu. It's mamon balim bechor mibaya. Are you going to come and you're going to say that we need to actually mention about a bechor? Obviously not. We know that a bechor, right, does not need none of these things, right? And therefore it's going to be considered mamon balim. Bechor does not need the smicha, nesachim, trufa, chazav, shok, and all these things. Elama Rabbi Yochanan, but rather Rabbi Yochanan comes and he says, Ben Azai comes to me, mitkaven lemiyute maaser. We're talking about to exclude maaser be'ema. What does that mean? Maaser be'ema, even though it's kadashim kalim, it's not considered mamon ba'alim. Remember, maaser be'ema is that when you have the animals and you come and you take off the 10th animal, you come and you make the big X. That's called maaser be'ema. So maaser be'ema, right? It's even though he's saying it's maaser, right? Maaser be'ema is kadashim kalim. It's not kodshe kadashim. It's not a korban olah, chatat, or an sham. It's kadashim kalim, but still it's not considered mamon ba'alim. The time as we learned in the Braita, bivchor ne'emar, by the bechor it says, Lo tifdeh. You cannot come and you cannot redeem it. V'nimkar, right? But if it was sold, tam chai, if it's tam and it's still alive, ubalmum chai, or it's a balmum and it's chai, v'shachut, right? And if it's going to be slaughtered, v'maaser ne'emar lo yigael, right? Which means like this: by a bechor, you're not allowed to redeem it. Pidyon means redemption. You put the money down and I'm going to redeem it, a substitute. You're not, even if it's going to be not only chai, even if it's a balmum and it's still chai, right? And it's shachut also. It's going to be slaughtered. By ma'aser be'ema, it says lo yigael. But the eno nimkar, you cannot sell it, not when it's a chai, not when it's shachut, not when it's tam, and not when it's a balmum. So therefore, you see from here that maaser be'ema cannot be sold. It comes out that it's not considered mamon balim. Meaning, this animal was yours until 10 minutes ago. You came and went out the animals, and then you come and you do maaser be'ema. You come, you put the big X. Once you come and you put the big X, that's it. It's not yours anymore. Right? It finished. It's not yours. So therefore, you cannot come and sell it. I don't care how it is. You cannot sell it. You cannot sell whether it's alive, whether it's shachut. What? It belongs to Hashem. And therefore, even though it's kadashim kalim, it does not belong to you. And that's what we're trying to say until here. Even though it's kadashim kalim, it's not mamon baalim. It does not belong to you. Ravina matnila aseifa. Ravina comes and he's going to learn the words of Rabbi Yochanan on the seifa. Abba Yosef ben Dostai Omer, Abba Yosef ben Dostai says, Lo amar ben Azai, ela bivchor bilvad. When did ben Azai come and he said these words? He's only talking about only, right, in a bechor. Okay? What does that mean? Right? If you remember when we started off and we were talking about the entire concept of kadashim kalim, that if you're going to come and you're going to swear, right, about kadashim kalim, you have to pay back the keren and the chomesh and the korban hasham, right? Remember that keren is principal, chomesh is additional fifth, and the korban hasham is a guilt offering, okay? Because it's the human being's money. And then we came and we brought down that, so those are words of Rabbi Yosef, but Ben Azai comes and he says, it's coming to include the shlamim, right? And Abba Dusai comes and he says, we're only talking about a bechor. So says the Gemara, right? Abba Yosef ben Dostai Omer, Lo amar Ben Azai, when did Ben Azai say this? Only by a bechor. Lemiute mai, what is it coming to exclude? Ilema lemiute shlamim. If you're going to come and tell me that it's coming to exclude the shlamim, he says, Hashta, now we're going to come and we're going to ask the following question. Uma bechor shekadosh menechem. Just like a bechor, which is going to be sanctified from the womb, meaning a bechor you do not choose. The animal gives birth, it's the first born child, that's it, it's called a bechor. And it's kadosh menechem. Mamonovu, it's still considered mamon baalim, right? That means one more time, a bechor, it's also kadashim kalim, but it's mamon baalim. It still belongs to the human being. It's not Hashem's. It's not mamon gavoa. Mamon baalim. Shlamim mibaya. So he comes and he says, so then you have a doubt by shlamim? For sure, then shlamim is not kadosh menechem. It's only afterwards when you come and you make a shlamim. So obviously it should not be mamon. It should be mamon baalim. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan comes Rabbi Yochanan and he says, lemiute maaser. This comes to food maaser. Kidatanya, as we learned in a braita, bevechor neemar, by the bechor it says lo tifdeh v'nimkar. Right? What does that mean? It says you're not allowed to redeem it. So what does that mean? Pidyon en lo. But if it's going to be nimkar, when it's going to be tam, when it's going to be normal without right chai, or shubal mum chai, v'shachut, and if it's going to be shachut, right? B'maaseh neemar lo yigael ve'eno nimkar lo chai ve'lo shachut ve'lo tam ve'lo bal mum. Which means that you see from here that it's not mamon bali, but you cannot sell it. You cannot do nothing with it. That is a maaseh, right? Ha b'v'chor b'vad ka'amar. So therefore, obviously, when Abba Yosef ben Dostai comes and he says that he's only talking about the bechor, it's only the bechor. So how can you tell me now that it's coming to include a shlamim? So you're right, Kasha. It's a good question, right? It's a good question. We have a question on this. We do not have an answer. Okay, fine. Now we're going to start. Rava comes and he says, what does the Mishnah say when it says nechasim she'en b'hem meila? The Mishnah says that if you right now come and you're going to be patur for tashlumei nezikin on nichseh hekdesh, even if it's going to be kadashim kalim. So he comes and he says nechasim she'en b'hem meila, right? So he says nechasim she'en b'hem din meila. We're not talking about that there's no meila. There's no din meila. My nihu, what is that exactly? The idiot. Nechasim of idiot, which means nichseh hekdesh, anything which belongs to the hekdesh. Whether we're talking about kadashim kadashim or kadashim kalim, okay, you're not going to be chayav. We already learned this. You remember? We already learned. If your animal comes and gores hekdesh, you're not chayav l'shalem. Okay? But there are certain properties, nechasim, she'en b'hem din meila, which do not have kiddusha l'shamayim, and that's a idiot. So he comes and he says, right, that means you're not going to be chayav. So says the Gemara, velitne de idiot. So why don't you just say nechasim shel idiot? Why do you say nechasim she'en b'hem meila? Just say nechasim shel idiot. Right? That obviously nechasim of idiot, there's no meila. There's no meila if you damage, right, somebody else's property. right? I come and I damage Jean Doe's property. It's Mila. Mila is consecrated. Mila means it goes to the Bet HaMikdash, right? Why in the world would I be chayav Mila if I damage Jean Doe's property? Doesn't make sense. So just say, V'litnei de idiot. Kasha, it's a good question. You're right. It should have just said the idiot according to the Shita. Okay? So Amar Rabbi Abba, says Rabbi Abba, Shlamim she'iziku. Yeah, when you have a shlamim, that they came and they were mazik. Yeah, what does that mean? You have shvarim tamim of a shlamim, that the shlamim itself came and damaged. So you have a peace offering. Remember, shlamim is a peace offering. And that shlamim goes and damages. Okay? So it says over here, goveni bisaran, you're going to collect the chetzi nezek from the basar, which is eaten by the ba'alim. Meaning like this, when you bring a korban shlamim, right, part of it is eaten by the ba'alim, by the owners. So you collect the chetzi nezek. You only collect the chetzi nezek from the part which the ba'alim are going to come and they're going to eat. But you cannot collect from the emunim, which is a part of the korban, which goes on the mizbeach. Okay? Only, huh?
The Kohen is going to eat this one?
No. It goes on the mizbeach. Emurin are brought on the mizbeach, the limbs. Okay? So says the Gemara, Pshita, obviously, emurin legavo asalke. The emurin, they go to Hashem. So how are you going to collect that? Obviously, you can't collect that. So answers the Gemara, lo tzricha leguvemi b'saran keneged emurin. What we're talking about, I would have thought to say that you could collect from its flesh, opposite, meaning in parallel to the emurim, right? Which means, right now, I want to come and I want to collect from this shore, the shlamim. So he comes and he says, I cannot collect from the part which is supposed to go to the emurim. I can only collect the nezek from the part which goes to the human being. Which means, let's say he did more damage, right? He did more damage. This ox comes and he damages. Chetzi nezek is not enough to collect from the part which is Baalim. I want to now say, you know what, but fine, but I cannot take from the part which goes to the Mizbeach, but I want to take the value of that. Says, no, you can't do that. Why? Because since the value of the Murim goes on to the Mizbeach, meaning this part goes to the Mizbeach, I cannot collect from it. I cannot collect.
The Chetzi is not sufficient.
You're going to come and you're going to damage a Rolls Royce, or you're going to damage a Volvo. You could damage the exact same part of the car. The nezek is completely different. The damage is completely different. The value is completely different. So let's say I do not have enough money on the insurance to pay for the Rolls Royce. I have enough money to pay for the Volvo. It's going to be a big difference.
When we say the Chetzi is...
You have to pay Chetzi nezek, not nezek shalem. Chetzi nezek, it's a tam. Okay, so you have to pay Chetzi nezek. But when you're paying the Chetzi nezek, you could only collect from the part of the animal which belongs to the Baalim, to the owner, not the Ekdesh part, meaning the part which is going to the Mizbeach. Okay? So, says the Gemara, Aliba Deman. So, who's this going like? Iliba de Rabbanan. If you're going to tell me that this goes according to Shitat Chachamim, Shita, obviously, Ha'amri, you just said, Kileka lishtelu mimehai lo mishtelu mimehai, which means just like you cannot come and you cannot collect from the Dmei Nezek, from Mazik Echad, which means, right, let's say you have, right, two different mazikim, right? It's just like you cannot collect from one, you cannot collect from the other one. So it's pashut that if one's going to be nizak, he cannot collect from the part which is not, he cannot collect from the part of the emurim, because obviously I cannot collect from that part, right? Because that goes to the mizbeach. V'yaliba de Rabbi Natan, if it's going according to the shita of Rabbi Natan, right? He comes and he says, Ha'amar, he says, Kileka lishtelu memehai mishtale mehai. He says, if you cannot collect from this half, you could collect from the other half, which means according to Rabbi Natan, if I cannot collect the entire amount from the part which goes to the Baalim, I should be able to collect from the other part which goes to the Mizbeach. Again, I cannot collect that part because that's going to the Mizbeach, but I can collect the value of it, right? Can negate that which is going to the Mizbeach, right? The part which is going to the Mizbeach, I can't do anything to it, but the value I would be able to do it. That is the Shita of Rabbi Natan. So answers the Gemara, really, I could go according to those shittot. Either Rabbanan, which means that I cannot collect from it, or like Rabbi Natan and I can collect from it. Now we're going to explain. When we're going to go according to the shita of Rabbanan, right? He comes and he says, Hanamile, one of these words, the Chachamim come and they say, right, that he cannot collect from another, right, mazik. Meaning, if you got the two different people that were mazik, you're right. If you cannot collect from one, you cannot collect from the other. Bitre gufe, because they're two different bodies. They're two different maziks, right? There's two different shores that they came in collectively, they damaged. So if I cannot collect from one, I'm not going to collect from another. But that's two different bodies. So therefore, according to Rabbanan, I cannot collect from one body if I cannot collect from the other body. That's two different bodies. But bechad gufa, but if it's going to be one body, which is the case here of the shlamim, matzi Elmaleh, you could tell him, I want to collect from any place where I could collect. Meaning, I don't care, right? I want to collect from whatever place. Remember, this is a shlamim, it's the same body. Just part of the body is going to be eaten by the human beings, by like the Baalim, the owners, and part of it is going to go up to the Gavoa, right? But it's the same body. So therefore, it could go according to the Shita of the Rabbanan. Or if you want, you could come and you could go according to Rabbi Natan. There, the Balashor could come and tell the Balabor, Ana Torai bevirach ashkachte. Right? I found my shor in your board. Okay, when it's dead, right? So therefore, right, you have all the nezik on you. What I cannot be koveh from this mazik, right, which is the balashor, I could collect from you. You'd give them a bet. Aval hacha, but over here, mimatzi amar, can he come and can he say, right, basar azik, emunin lo azik? Can he come and say that in the case of the shlamim, right, he comes and he says, right, can he come and he say that the nizak could come and say, the basar azik, the emunin lo, you're not going to be mazik? Can you actually say that? You can't say that, right? So therefore, even Rabbi Natan is going to be modeh that a chelek which is not given, right, to collect is not going to be collected because you cannot. And therefore, what happens is, right, you cannot say such a halacha in such a case. Now, again, this is the shita of how, right, Rashi is actually learning, right? But this is just the entire concept, right, that which we mentioned, okay? Now, until now, 1 minute. Yeah, so he comes now and he says like this. We're talking about now, right, the following. This is all, right, in accordance to what we learned, right, beforehand. Okay, so the Gemara is going to say, Amar Rava comes and he says, Toda she'zika, right, a behemat toda, the damages. Until now, we're talking about shlamim. Remember, a shlamim is kadashim kalim. Now we're going to speak about a toda. What is a toda? Maze toda. Kadashim kalim. Yeah, what? You sure?
Otherwise, you wouldn't ask.
So Rava comes and he says the toda she'zika. We're talking about a toda, which is also kadashim kalim. So we're continuing the thought process. Before we were talking about a shlamim, now we're talking about a toda she'zika that also does damages. Goveh mi besara is going to collect from the basar. Ve'ena goveh mi lachma, and is not going to collect from the breads. Remember that a korban toda brings how many breads? 40. Chazak Baruch, thank you. Right? You bring 40 breads. Right? So therefore, you could only collect from the animal, from the flesh of the animal, but not from the breads. Says the Gemara, lechem, breads? Pshita, obviously. Right? The nizak cannot collect for did the bread damage? the animal damage. The animal is the toda. Right? It's not the breads. Why in the world would you be able to collect from the breads? Doesn't make sense. So answers the Gemara, seifa tztichle, we needed it for the seifa. Nizak, ochel basar, umitkaper, right? V'mevi lechem. What does that mean? The nizak, that he's going to come and he's going to collect from the basar of the toda, he's going to eat the basar. Now, the mazik is going to be mitkaper, and he's going to come and he's going to bring the lechem, which means, right, that he wants to say that the zechut of the achilat basar v'kapara are two different things. Meaning, fine, the other guy will eat the meat, and you'll get the atonement. What's the problem? Right? And that's what we're trying to say. So says the Gemara, Hanami Pshita. Obviously, he says, why? Because if you don't bring the bread, you're not mitkaper. What's the problem? Ma'udetema answers the Gemara. I would have thought to say, Kevin the lecha machshir dezevachu. Since you need the bread, because the bread is machshir, the korban. So Elmaleh, I would say, Atachal basar v'ana iti lechem. You're going to eat the meat, and I'm going to bring the bread. Doesn't make sense. Kamash Malan comes teach you the lechem chiyuv the baalim. That the lechem is a chiyuv on the baalim, which means ala mitkaper, and therefore has nothing to do with actual hechsher of the eating of the korban. It has to do with the entire obligation of chiyuv ba'alin. The Gemara comes and the Gemara says, we're talking about the two dots, where the Mishnah said, Nechasim shehen shel bnei brit. Nechasim which belong to a Jew, of bnei brit. So says the Gemara, what is this coming to exclude? If it's going to tell me that it's going to exclude a case where Adam is patur if his money damaged property of Uvet Kochavim, Haktani lelekaman, we already learned in lekaman, Lamed Zayin Mubet. There it says, Shor shel Yisrael shenegach shor shel Uvet Kochavim, patur. It's a Mishnah. The Mishnah says, you have a shor shel Yisrael, it gores a shor shel Uvet Kochavim, he's going to be patur. So why did you have to mention it again? So answers the Gemara, Tana v'hada mefaresh, you're right. We taught it in our Mishnah, because we said nechasim shen shel bebrit, but then afterwards we were mefaresh yoter clear, meaning that we came and we explained it right much more clear. Okay, fine. Next, two dots, right? Nechasim miyuchadim. We said the chiyuv of tashlumin nizikin is davka with nechasim miyuchadim. What does it mean nechasim miyuchadim? Lemiute mai. Rav Yehuda lemiute ze omer shorcha izik v'ze omer shorcha izik. Right? What does that mean? Basically, right? What happens is that the Mishnah is talking about a safek whose shore was mazik. Meaning, you know that your shore was damaged. And there were two oxen beside there. You don't know which one. So you come and you say it was your shore. The other one says, no, it was your shore. The guy doesn't know which shore it was. He knows that one of them damaged. And he knows that his shore was damaged. He doesn't know who it was. So that's why it's not miyuchad. Right? It's not designated because you don't know who it was. So says the Gemara, if this one says shorcha izik, no, but rather it was your shorcha izik. So then what? So says the Gemara, we also learned that. Hatani lekaman. We learned it lekaman. Lamed Hei Amud Aleph. Lamed Hei Amud Aleph. We said, ayu shnayim rodfim achar echad. Imagine you have two shores running after the shore of one person. Ze omer shorcha izik, ze omer shorcha izik. Each one come and say it was your shore that did the damage. Shneim pturim. You're going to be patur. So we learned it mefurash. We already learned it. So says the Gemara, the exact same answer that we mentioned before. Tani v'ada b'faresh. You're right. We learned it in our Mishnah, the concept that it had to be miyuchad. But now we're going to explain it more. So therefore, later on, we explain it more. And by the way, that's what many times happens. For example, when you're going to write, for example, a contract, you start writing like the major terms, and then afterwards you come and you start deciphering and explaining the actual terms. So when we just mentioned the terms and whatever it was, number one, right? I come and I start explaining. That's what we just did in the Mishnah. In our Mishnah, we said the general terms. So we said bnei brit. Obviously, that comes to exclude good, but later on we're going to explain it, right? We're going to say miyuchad, but obviously exclusive. It's going to be two of them. We're going to explain it. So that's exactly what we did. Okay. We learned in the Braita, when it says nechasim yuchadim, right? Really, we could actually say that the pshat is it's coming to exclude hefker. So says again, what is the case of hefker? Hechadami, what's the case of hefker? If you're going to tell me now that our shore comes and is going to gore a shore of hefker, man tavale. Who's going to be tovea? It belongs to hefker. Hefker means ownerless. Who's going to demand the money? You have a shore which is wandering around in the street. Somebody comes and he's going to gore him. Yeah, an animal. Who's going to demand the money? It's ownerless. What are you going to do? Who's going to demand it? So he says, Ela barada, the opposite. The negach Torah defker, the Torah didan. A shore of hefker comes and it damages our shore. So says the Gemara, leizel, right? The yetik. So why doesn't he come and take the shore of the hefker? Right? Yelech anizak, and you should take the shore of hefker. Right? Who's going to come and he's going to stop him? Just take it. Meaning, if this shore belongs to hefker, which means ownerless, and it damages your shore, take it. And how by doing that, you paid yourself back. Who's stopping you? It's hefker. Who's stopping you? So answers the Gemara, no. He damaged you, and then somebody else came and grabbed it. So therefore, since somebody else came and he grabbed it, what happens is that now somebody else owns it. So you can't just keep it. Somebody else already made a chazakah on it. So now it says, but he already damaged you, so you could still grab from the damages. Okay? Ravina comes and he says, no, really, we're talking about a case where a shore gores, And then afterwards, the Baalim come and they're Magdish the shore. Nagach ve'achar kach ifkir. Or he gored, and then you made it ifkir. That's the case. Okay, we also learned this in a Braita. This is what Rabbi Yehuda says. Whether an animal gores and then afterwards you made it ekdesh, or nagach or it gores and afterwards you made it efker, patur, you're going to be patur from mita. Shneimar vehuad bivalav ve'mit ish o isha, right? Ve'gam be'alav yumat. What does that mean? Ad shetehem mita ve'amada bedin shavim ke'echad. So here is actually something incredible. We're learning that right now, if you have a shore that damages, well, here, technically speaking, he actually killed, right? But he's going to come and kill, and then you made it efker, or he killed, and then afterwards you made it ekdesh. In such a case, you don't kill the animal. Meaning, usually you would kill the animal. Now you do not kill the animal. Why don't you kill the animal? Because when it says in the pasuk, "Vuad bivalav ve'mit ish," right? And then it says, "V'gam be'alav yumat." It has to be that the making of it has to be with the same, the amada badim, and until the shatamita, it has to be the same category. And the fact that you made it hekdesh, or you made it efker in between, before it was taken to din, before it was going to be obligated the death penalty, so now you're going to become patur. So says the Gemara, ugmar din lo baina. He comes and he says, what? You don't need gemar din? Right? He says you don't need that. It should be hashor yisakel begmar din. When it says hashor yisakel, that is talking about gemar din. So we should learn from here that the shore should be under the same balut until gemar din, not until the death penalty. Until the gemar din. Gemar din means the verdict, not until the actual death penalty. Elaima, but rather, right? You have to say achete mita v'amada bedin u'gemar din shavim ke'echad. You're right. It has to be the mita v'amada bedin and gemar din should be shavim ke'echad with one baal, meaning the fact that he came and he changed it, right? He changed the ownership in between, so therefore it's going to be a different halacha. So this guy, he actually changed it. He changed the halacha. He actually saved the shore in the end. Okay, again, at the end of the day, he's not benefiting because once he made it ekdesh, it's not his anymore. And once he made it efker, it's not his anymore. But what he gains is that the animal's not dying. But that's just because of a technical, logistic issue, right? That it had to be the same category, right, until the end, which means until the Gemar.
And the Majid doesn't say anything.
Which one? The two dots comes and it says, Chutz mireshut miyuchedet lamazik. If you remember, we said the damages has to be in a place where is a reshut, which is for the mazik. The Elmaleh, that he comes and he says, Torcha b'shutim mebay. What is your shore doing in my reshut? Which means like this: if right now they come into my property and something happens, so it's his fault. Why? I'm sorry. What is your shore doing in my property? Right? He comes into my property, he gets damaged. What are you doing in my property? That's your fault, not my fault. So then it says Ushut Nizak Mazik. It has to be a shoot for both of them, like the Nizak and the Mazik. Amar Rav Chasta Amar Ravimi. He says Rav Chasta in the name of Ravimi. Chatzar Shutafin Chayav Ba'al Hashem V'al Regel. Do you know when you have a chatzar which belongs to the Shutafin, two different partners? So they're going to be Chayav Tashumei Nezeh also on the Shen and also on Regel. V'hachi Kamar. This is what it means to say. Chutz v'reshut ha'miyuchedet lemazik depatur, u'reshut ha'nizak v'mazik k'sheizik chav ha'mazik. Rabbi Elazar says no. He says patur l'Hashem v'al regel. He's not going to be chayav. He's going to be patur. V'hachi Kamar. This is what it means to say. Chutz v'reshut ha'miyuchedet lemazik, u'reshut ha'nizak v'mazik nami patur, u'k'sheizik chav ha'mazik la'tuyei keren. This comes to include the keren, which means like this. There's going to become a machloket. What happens if you have a chatzar which belongs, right, to two partners, and right now this animal comes and he's going to be damaging with shen and regel. So we are going to say that he's going to be chayav, right? Why? He says bekol makom, except for the reshut of the miyuchad to the mazik. And here, right, he's going to be obviously that he's going to be patur if it belongs to the mazik, because what are you doing in his property? But if it's going to be reshut meshutefet, and now you have the nizak and the mazik, he's going to be chayav. Why? My animal is supposed to be here. We're partners. Why shouldn't my animal be here? Right? So if your animal now damages my animal, this is also my property. Well, you could tell me not to be here. It's both. But Rabbi Elazar comes and he says he's going to be patur on Shem Regel. He's only going to be chayav on keren. So says the Gemara, Hani Hechal Shmuel. I understand Shmuel that he comes and he says that regel, that keren is not considered shor, right? Because if you remember, he wanted to say that what is mav'eh, right? That it's not going to be considered, right? There was keren, and then there was the other part. So keren, right? That's what he's saying here. Niske keren is not klulim in the shore. Okay? So he comes and he says, right, because according to Shmuel, the Arba Avot, which we taught was regel, bor, shen, and keren, right? Which means the keren is not the shore. Shore is regel. It's not keren. It's a different halakha. But according to Rav, that he says shore v'chol mili the shore, it's a shore and everything to do with the shore. Chava mazik la toyimai. What does it mean now when he says that he's going to be obligated to pay? So answers the Gemara. La tuya the Tanu Rabbanan. This comes to include that which Rabbi say. Keshizik chava mazik lavi shomer chinam v'shoel. Right. This is coming to include a shomer chinam v'shoel. Noseh sachar v'soched. Shizika be'ema b'shutan. That an animal came and damaged in their property. Tam is going to be Mishalem Chatzi Nezek. The Mulad is going to be Mishalem Nezek Shalem. Nifretza Balayla. What happens if it was broken during the nighttime? Or Parzo Lestino, there were bandits that came and they broke it. Yatstava Zika. And it comes out and it damages. So what happens? It's going to be Patur. The Shomer will be Patur. Why? Listen, if somebody breaks the wall during the nighttime, whether it's bandits or it breaks on its own, how am I supposed to know? I did my proper Shmirah. What happened afterwards? I cannot do anything. So Amar More says, it's coming to include the Shomer Chinam Shoel Noseh Sachar V'Socher. What's the case? If you're going to tell me the Aske Torah, the Mashil, the Torah, the Shoel, that the one of the Mashil, right, went and he damaged the one of the Shoel, right? So Elmaleh, what do we just say? Ilu Azik Be'alma Bayit L'Shulu Me'at. If you would have damaged anyone else, you would have had to pay. Hashta Daske LeTorah Didach. But now that my ox damaged your ox, Ba'ina L'Shalume, I have to pay. Why? Ela de aske Torah de Shoel Torah de Mashid, the opposite. It was the borrower's ox that damaged the other person's ox. So Elmaleh, so why can't he just come and he could tell him? Elmaleh, he could tell him, Ilu Yitzak Me'alma, if he's going to come and he's going to be mazik, right? So Ba'il Shlume Kula Torah, you have to pay the entire thing. Right? You have to pay me the entire nezek, whether it's a tamar or muad. Hashta de aske Torah didach. But now that it's your shore, right, that damages, Palga Niska Udir Shalamli, you're only going to pay me chetzi nezek. So it comes out that whether the Braita is talking about the shore of the shoel, right, that's damaging the mash'il, or the other way around, the mash'il, which is damaging the shoel, right, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, the entire Braita. The Braita does not make sense what's going on. Remember one more time, you have the shoel, right, and he's borrowing. He borrows an animal, and now we have to understand whose ox is doing the damage. Was it the borrowers to the other persons, or was it the other persons to the borrowers? That's what we're asking. We're trying to analyze. And either way does not make sense. So he comes and he says like this, Leolam, really be'emet, to ask Torah de mash'il, le Torah de shoel. Really, it's the one that lent to the one that borrowed. Meaning, I come and I lent my animal, right, to John Doe. Yeah, so remember, I'm the mash'il, and John Doe is the shoel, he's the borrower, but I'm the mash'il, I'm lending it out. And now what happens is, in such a case, the Braita went and he said, he's chayav l'shalem, right, demea nezek. Now, if you're going to ask, right, 1 second, he had to be shomer on this, right? Meaning, why in the world should I pay? I lend John Doe my ox, and my ox goes and gores his ox. Who had to take care of the ox? Me or John Doe? John Doe, the shoel. So why in the world do I have to pay? Doesn't make sense. So he says, what are we dealing with? That what happened was that he accepted upon himself the shmirah of the body in order that it shouldn't come and damage another animal. And therefore, since it's not going to damage another animal, so that's why he's going to say that. Velo kibel alav, and he did not accept achrayut on shmirat zakav. On the shmirah, meaning like this, you went and you said, I'm going to take care of the animal, but I'm not going to take care of the nizakim, meaning I don't have to watch the animal about nezeks, right, or lot nezeks, or all these things. Why? That's nothing to do with me, right? And therefore, since that's nothing to do with me, I didn't accept it upon myself. So if he's going to damage, I didn't accept it upon myself damages. So there's no problem, right? What do you mean no problem? Meaning, what does it have to do with me? I didn't accept myself the damages, so you're not obligated to pay. So therefore, it actually makes sense, right, to what we're talking about, right? This entire concept, right, of what we're talking about. Okay, that's until here.